When Elizabeth Taylor ran off with Debbie Reynolds' husband, it became the scandal of the decade. People loved to pick sides, but maybe they were both wronged by the same guy. The world followed this drama closer than the first moon landing, and the tabloids were controlling the reins. Today, we're diving into the infamous feud between Elizabeth Taylor and Debbie Reynolds, the love triangle that rocked Hollywood, the tabloid storm that followed, and how two of the biggest stars of the era found their way back to friendship. They say Hollywood friendships are fickle, but Elizabeth Taylor and Debbie Reynolds were the real deal, at least for a while. Their story begins at MGM, the glittering dream factory where both girls practically grew up. Debbie Reynolds later recalled, "I went to MGM when I was around 17, and Liz was there too, but she was already a star. We went to school together on the lot when she was in between films. I was just a beginner, and she and I were not in any matter alike, but we got along very well." And they really did. Despite their differences, Debbie with her wholesome girl-next-door charm, and Elizabeth with her smoldering beauty and already complicated love life, the two hit it off. As young contract players, they shared more than a studio. They shared classrooms, dressing rooms, and eventually a genuine bond. Off-screen, their love lives were straight out of a Hollywood script. Elizabeth married the successful producer Mike Todd in 1957, her third husband. She famously called him the true love of her life, and described him as larger than life, a man whose big personality matched her dramatic, passionate energy. Debbie, on the other hand, was swept up in a very different kind of romance. She married singer Eddie Fisher, one of America's most beloved singers at the time. And yes, despite all the red flags, she fell for him. Debbie admitted years later, "It wasn't as if I hadn't been warned." Frank Sinatra himself, her co-star in The Tender Trap, tried to talk her out of it, saying, "Don't marry Eddie." He said, "I shouldn't get married to a singer. We're not faithful. It's ridiculous for you to take this on." I said, "Why? I don't think I will listen to you. I really think he's adorable. My mother thought he was adorable too." And so Debbie married Eddie, and Elizabeth married Mike, and somehow the four of them became one of Hollywood's golden couples. Glamorous, photogenic, inseparable. Debbie and Elizabeth became even closer. Debbie named her daughter Carrie after Elizabeth's daughter, Lisa, whose middle name was Carrie. She even named her son Todd in honor of Mike. And when Elizabeth and Mike threw their lavish wedding in 1957, Eddie Fisher was the best man and Debbie Reynolds was the matron of honor. That's how close they were. Their kids played together, the women vacationed together, they were family in every way that mattered. Elizabeth even gushed about Debbie in interviews, once calling her bright, funny, and refreshingly honest. Debbie, for her part, thought Elizabeth was magnetic, but lovable all the same. But behind all the photos, parties, and press clippings, life was building towards something darker. Because one day, Debbie picked up the phone to call Elizabeth, and she had no idea that phone call would be the beginning of the end. In March of 1958, Elizabeth Taylor's world came crashing down. She was just 26, in the middle of filming Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, when she got the news. Her husband, Mike Todd, had died in a horrific plane crash. They had only been married for a year, but she mentioned many times throughout her life that Mike was her one true love. She later said, "I saw no reason for his death. For several years, I couldn't figure out why I wasn't on that plane with him, because I was supposed to have been." After Todd's death, MGM gave Elizabeth just 10 days off before pushing her to return to set. The studio was bleeding money on the halted production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and while the pressure was intense, Elizabeth agreed to go back, partly because she didn't want to sit at home drowning in grief. She mentioned, "I became Maggie. Acting was the only time I could function in the weeks after Mike's death." Still, the decision wasn't easy. She was devastated, emotionally shattered, but she faced the cameras anyways, slipping into character because it was the only place she could survive. At the time, Debbie was working on location, and with Elizabeth shattered and alone, she encouraged her husband Eddie Fisher to check in on their good friend. What began as comfort quickly evolved into something more. more. In the wake of Mike Todd's death, Eddie, who had been one of Mike's closest friends, became a stand-in of sorts. Maybe he reminded Elizabeth of Mike. Maybe she just needed to feel something again. But within a few months, grief turned into passion and an affair began. Debbie had no idea until one casual phone call blew everything open. Checking in on Elizabeth, she made a routine call, only to hear Eddie's voice in the background in Elizabeth Taylor's house. This was the moment it all unraveled. And when the affair became public, the scandal exploded. The headlines weren't just brutal, they were historic. Photoplay ran emotional cover blurbs like, "Will Liz break Eddie's heart?" pushing the narrative of Taylor as a seductive threat to yet another man's stability. Another cover pleaded, "Please Eddie, don't let them take the children away," playing up the drama of Debbie and Eddie's real-life custody battle. Debbie Reynolds was painted sympathetically across several magazine features. One photoplay cover showed her stating, "I'm still very much in love with Eddie," while others cast her as the wronged wife in heartfelt interviews. Tabloids and scandal sheets didn't hold back. Confidential magazine labeled Taylor Hollywood's most talked about homewrecker in one issue, and by 1960, TV and movie screen was questioning her morals directly with headlines like, "Would a good wife do what Liz does?" The media tore Elizabeth apart, dragging her name through every headline and hotel lobby. She was called a homewrecker, a husband stealer, and a whore. It became one of the most intense public slut-shamings in Hollywood history. As cruel as it was, the coverage rarely considered the full emotional reality. Yes, Elizabeth was grieving. Yes, she made a terrible decision. But trauma doesn't excuse betrayal, and Debbie Reynolds was left to face the betrayal under a global spotlight. Debbie later said, "I was heartbroken and I was very, very humiliated. But I had 2 children and I had to keep going." She didn't just lose her husband and her best friend, she lost them both in front of the entire world. The betrayal wasn't private. It was published, picked apart, and passed around like candy. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get worse, Eddie did not waste time. He and Debbie divorced in 1959, and in the kind of move that practically dared the public to hate him, Eddie married Elizabeth Taylor that same year. Debbie was barely out of the picture before the ink dried on the marriage license. But as public sympathy poured in for Debbie and condemnation rained down on Elizabeth, one question still lingered. Would Elizabeth and Eddie's relationship survive the scandal that made it? And could there ever be forgiveness after something like this? Elizabeth Taylor and Eddie Fisher may have defied the world to be together, but that didn't mean it was meant to last. Their marriage, born of grief and scandal, fizzled out in just 5 years. Elizabeth later admitted she wasn't proud of how it all happened, though she didn't exactly back down from it either. She said in a 1992 interview, "I was a very moral girl, and I married every man I slept with, so it was legal. Moral wasn't what they were calling me at the time, though." As for Eddie, let's just say the spark didn't last. Elizabeth reportedly lost interest fast. Even Debbie later said, "I don't think Elizabeth ever really loved Eddie. I think she just wanted Mike Todd back." That seemed to be the truth. Eddie had been a comfort blanket, not a soulmate. Then came Richard Burton. In 1962, while still married to Eddie, Elizabeth met Burton on set of Cleopatra, and the chemistry was volcanic. Their affair launched yet another global scandal. This time so hot the Vatican itself issued a statement condemning Elizabeth's behavior. The Vatican Weekly accused her of erotic vagrancy. Once again, Elizabeth's love life became front page news. Eddie, blindsided and heartbroken, was left in the dust again. In one sharp twist of karma, the woman he left his wife for left him for someone else. Meanwhile, Debbie Reynolds carried on with remarkable grace. She remarried in 1960 to businessman Harry Carl, though that marriage came with its own troubles, including his gambling addiction. Still, she focused on her kids and her career, building a legacy as both a performer and a survivor. As for Eddie Fisher, he remained bitter. In his 1981 autobiography, he painted Debbie as calculating and tight-fisted. claiming their marriage was doomed long before the affair. She stated, "His memory of what went on in our lives is absolutely not true. I did not want to read it because I did not want to get upset. I have no venom about Eddie. I'm trying not to dislike him. He's the father of my children." And then there was the famous boat incident. Years after the scandal, Debbie and Elizabeth found themselves booked on the same cruise. Debbie, stunned, called her daughter Carrie Fisher in a panic. As Carrie later recalled, she told her mother, "You don't have to talk to her, Mom, but just be in the same room, make her suffer." But when the two actresses actually ran into each other on board, it didn't go down like a tabloid smackdown. They talked, they laughed, and just like that, the ice broke. It was not an overnight fix, but it was the beginning of something that few thought possible: forgiveness. Over the years, Elizabeth and Debbie rebuilt their friendship. They called each other for help when they were sick, they appeared at events together, and in 2001, they co-starred in These Old Broads, a made-for-TV movie written by none other than Carrie Fisher, because of course she would turn their infamous love triangle into a script. The film was loosely based on the real-life feud between her mother and Elizabeth, with two aging Hollywood actresses forced to work together after decades of bad blood. Carrie later put it perfectly. Referring to the scandal that tore her family apart, she said, "Elizabeth Taylor really did us a favor. She got Eddie out of our lives." Debbie herself agreed. Her views softened over the decades. In her later years, she said, "We just happened to love the same man. She got over it, I got over it. Two women, one mess of a man, and a story that somehow found its way to closure." Eddie Fisher really did end up the biggest loser in all of this. He left one woman for another, only to be discarded and remembered mostly as a footnote in their drama. But if you think stealing a husband was messy, wait till you hear what happened when two sisters spent decades trying to destroy each other. I have this video linked in the eye and down below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more juicy stories from old Hollywood's golden age of scandal, and thank you for watching.